Hey guys, my name is Carlos Mendez. I'm a 3D artist using SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Today in quick tips, setting up a sunlight environment. This is the first of two videos using the sunlight environment, so please be on the lookout for part two. Something to note before I start, this is the Visualize Pro only feature, and I will be using the Camaro project as an example. So when is it good to use a sunlight environment? Well, this is perfect for transportation, interior designers, exterior designers, ArcVis industry, buildings and construction, and pretty much any industry that has products that live outdoor. So the reason to use this type of environment is to produce picture perfect sunlight and shadows that look and behave just like the real world. So this environment type also gives you the most control over cast shadows. So let me walk you through some of the settings here. Again, this is the Camaro project that you can download. And if you look here, I have it right here. So the way you add, let's start by adding this environment. So you add it just like any other environment. You click on the add button up here, and then you click on new sunlight environment. So let's do that. Right off the top, you see the interface is a little bit different. There's some parts that look like any other HDR, uh, like the background type. You can use the environment, or it can be a color. The brightness, you can go up or down just like any other HDR environment, and the rotation can do as well. However, we have a world map down here, and that is awesome because you can have it point to a particular location in the world and a particular time uh, of the month or of the year that you want to simulate. So I'm from Los Angeles, so if I want this to be exactly in LA, I can have that by either clicking on the lat longs here, right? Like there, it's roughly about right. But I can also say, let's make, if I wanted to make it pretend like I'm in the equator, I can click on the equator here, and then I could, let's see, click on the equator, and I can position it anywhere around the world here that I might want, or maybe I want it to be in Australia, right? So I can click it down there, and you can see how the light of the sun adjusts to that. I can also be very granular and select what time of the day I'm creating a rendering for. All right. Next step is the specific sunlight features. And for this, we have a few here that are designed specifically to control sunlight. So for this, in this case, you can see the sky. This is the area where the sunlight is coming through. First up is haze. Haze, just like smog, if I slide the slider up, you'll notice how everything gets a little bit yellow. The blues really kind of dim down, and the source of light kind of decentralizes from the sun being the only source to everything kind of lighting up. You can tell that the blues are gone. So if I bring this down, the dark blues and sort of the dark tones of the sky come up, and the area where the sun is rising or setting is a lot brighter. So that's haze. Next up is red or blue shift. This can be used if you want to manipulate the blues or the reds, depending if it's a sunrise or sunset. So, say if I want to make this look a little bit redder because I might want to fake this to look more like a sunset, I might want to shift it a little bit on the red, right? So you have a much warmer image at this point. Again, if you go more on the extremes of this slider, you can really get some artistic and really exaggerated results. Let me undo that. Put that, let's see, to 0. Speaking of saturation, you have an independent slider that will control just that. You can either make it monochromatic by completely killing the saturation, or it can just be something like this where it's absolutely set to 2.0 and it's going to be super exaggerated. Keep in mind, by the way, that the reflections also get affected. So you can get interesting artistic results if you say, set something like this up, and then you're going to general and switch to an environment that's color, so you can see what an interesting image you can get. The next step is switching the horizon blur. And the horizon blur refers to that, obviously, that line where the sky meets the earth. So it's set at 0.1 as a default, but you can manipulate that by making it as blurry as the slider lets you. The reason why you might want to do that, again, it's not just for simply observing what happens to the environment, but if you want to highlight a particular surface feature of your design. In this case, you can see how it's much blurred here in the reflection, but if we want to bring it down and make it sharp again, we just slide that to the left, and now you can see how it sharpens up a little bit, right? This paint, in this case, it doesn't happen to be 100% reflective, so if it's, let me see if I can manipulate that and switch it to just to drive a point. It looks like there's a roughness. If I were to make it clear coat roughness of 0, you see that very, very sharp reflection there. If I now go back to the settings of the sunlight and now keep an eye on the reflection, if I now drag horizon blur to the right, you can see how it goes from blurry to sharp and so on. Okay, let's undo all that stuff. All right, I think that did the trick. Yeah, clear coat roughness, perfect. All right, back to the sunlight settings. All right, the next thing was sun brightness. That's self-explanatory. The brighter the sun, the hotter the spotlights here you get in the reflection, and also the darker the shadows, right? They get punched up. You can see how darker it gets. Okay, I'm gonna undo that. Another interesting feature that you have is sun diameter. Now, on Earth, we know the diameter of the sun doesn't change, but if you were, say, to want to make a rendering for, like you're rendering this in a planet like Mercury, that you're much closer to the sun, you're actually able to do that. And I can show you how you won't tell by the sky itself, because if I were to increase the sun diameter, you can't really tell. The sky doesn't really change, and this part of the image is so blown out you can't really tell. So for the purpose of this example, I'm gonna shift the red here, and you can see the diameter of the sun right there, and you can see how I can increase it, and it just grows. Now you'll notice that the shadow also changes. It gets a lot punchier, and everything kind of gets brighter. And this is because Visualize is a renderer that is physically based. So just like anything, if the size of the source of light increases, but not the actual the amount of light, you're still going to get more light because there's now more surface exposing the same amount of photons. So that's the reason why you end up getting more light. So be mindful of that if you're playing with that feature. So, however, a reason why you might want to do that is to, again, the reflections. So let me move around the environment so you can see what I mean by that. If I switch the environment here, let's see, somewhere here you can see the sun is a little more dramatic. I'm going to now rotate this a little bit more so there it is, you can see the paint. So the reason why I think this you might want to use this is because if you say want to see that reflection a little bit more, or you wanted the sun somehow to cover a little bit better, you can always increase it, and you can see. Again, you're gonna burn the paint, so that'll mean that you have to bring down the brightness. That way it just doesn't just blast it. Not to 0, just a tad bit, and you can see now you get kind of the equivalent amount of light. Okay. Something else too you could do is that you can increase the sun glow. So if I bring this down to diameter 1, which I think is the default, and I increase the sun glow, keep an eye on that. Notice that it's somewhat sharp. If I now increase the sun glow, you can see how it feathers. And even the metallic picks up a little bit of that. So there's actually the area of the way that the Fresnel and the metallic behaves is different when there's a glow. Okay. Now the last two settings in the sunlight tab are floor color, which obviously represents the ground, and night color. The floor color is the reason why you might want to switch is because you might want the reflections on the body of the paint to be a little bit different. Maybe have something like green or something like that, and you can tell how it picks it up on the bottom. This, just like before, or like any other color selection, you have the droplet. You can just kind of drag and decide what you want, right? But I think much more interesting is let me bring this to default. So much more interesting and perhaps more artistic is the use of the night color. Now, we're not going to render at nighttime. That doesn't really make sense because if I were to switch this to a night hour, right? It doesn't, like at this point, why even have a sky? The reason why that's important is because if you look at the blues, the deep blues that you get in the sky, that's that's because there is a multiplication of the sort of the blues that you get in the sky plus the sort of the darkness of space. So if I were to switch the night color to anything but black, you now start getting blue mixed with whatever color I select. So if I say I select the red, you can see here, if I start applying red, now that area that should, before that, it was really not influencing the sky, is now starting to mix. So you can get really interesting colors and you can get interesting results. So if I now start mixing, let's say a red in the sky and I'm gonna add like a green on the ground, right? Well, this might look wacky. If I now go into general and switch the environment to color, you start getting really interesting, super artistic results here. So you can get something that's very, very interesting. And now if you add another layer of coolness here, let me make that like an orange. You get some really funky and really very neat results. I like that quite a bit. Huh, cool. So you can see how this is useful. Cool. So now the last option I wanted to share with you is the advanced. Now, the advanced tab is very similar to what we have on the other one, so I'll really just breeze through this. Again, brightness if you want to modify tone mapping. You can flatten floor, although by standard it kind of behaves flattened when you're using the environment background. You can rotate it. However, you can also rotate it in some other options like right here, rotation. And if you use some of the lat long behavior, you can use floor reflections and roughness. Again, if you disable this, the floor shadow, it will also disable reflections, or you can just increase reflections and get some of that in there. Cool. So let's now take this and create this vehicle in a sort of asphalt environment and see what we get. And then we can pump out some renderings and hopefully it's something that you guys find useful. Great. So let's start fresh by just erasing the sunlight environment. Alrighty. And it goes back to what we started. Perfect. So let's create another one. Let's see. Sunlight environment. Great. We're back to where we started. Let me switch to the fast rendering mode. All right, so let's create a ground. We're gonna click on the add new model and click on plane. Okay, it's thinking. Now I'm gonna make that larger because you want, if you're gonna do this, you wanna make sure it's pretty large because you want to not be able to see the square edges when you grow it, and this seems to be okay. All right, next thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna create some appearances. Now I created this earlier, but I'm going to walk you through how I created them. So the first thing I want to create is an asphalt. I'm going to right click and say new appearance. The asphalt, I'm going to select a plastic because I want to see some of that specularity that you don't see if it's matte. I'm going to jump right into texture, click on that one. And I already made this texture called tarmac. I'm going to open that one and I'm going to apply it. All right, this is obviously, it needs to be repeated more. Otherwise, it's going to look just really bad. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to tile it, and I believe tiling it at 30 or 35 is good. Great. All right, next step is giving it a bump, which I already have here. I called it tarmac bump. I'm going to do the same thing, tile it at 35. All right, so we're getting somewhere. However, I want this texture to look like it just rained and it started to dry up. So I want little light puddles of humidity on the tarmac. So we're going to click on specular, and I have this texture I found online. Right, and now great. Now you get something here that's starting to look starting to look good. One second, hold on a second. This is freaking out a little bit. All right, so now we're gonna get spots based on the specularity texture. Then some spots look a lot more reflective than others. Great, looks like it rained for a couple hours or maybe a couple minutes and then it started to dry. So now we have something here that it looks like it's just missing some demarcations on the ground. So let's do that. So for that, I am going to create a decal. Now these decals I created in Photoshop, they're simple squares. I'm gonna make this line that indicates a yellow no crossing line. I'm gonna drag it, click on it, and now right now it's proportionately locked. So if I drag any of the either the X or the Z, you'll notice that they both directions will scale down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into mapping and I'm going to click on that little link icon to break them. Now at this point I can drag at the X and the Z is not going to grow. So let's just make it something like that. Cool. Next step, I created a very simple appearance here that's just a matte yellow, and for that, just so I could color that decal. So I'm gonna drag that on top, and you obviously are not seeing anything. So we're gonna click on the decal, and I'm gonna untick Show Decal Texture. And notice that sometimes there's this little bug where it shows a different material. So all you have to do is just click on the decal, click on the appearance, and then disable it and enable it, and now it picks up the correct appearance on the decal. We're going to do another decal here. It's the dash marks. Same thing. I'm going to drag them on the ground. I am going to orient that correctly. I'm going to put it here just to mark the other lane. Now this is not perfect, but have fun with it. Next thing, I'm going to give it that white appearance. Click on dash marks again, and I'm going to untick Show Decal Texture just so you can start seeing it. Sorry about that. Now I'm also going to unlink it so it's not proportionately scaled. Now I can kind of pinch it like that. Okay, let's see. What's up, buddy? All right, let me zoom in there. All right. All right, so we have that. The only thing we're missing are some tire marks. So let's just add tire marks. Also, those are also great as decals. So you're gonna right click, new decal. I happen to make a couple, so I'm just gonna use one here. I'm gonna drag it and I'm going to drag it on top. And just like the other parts, I'm gonna scale them down just so they look like they fit roughly. It doesn't have to be behind the vehicle, but just so it looks like the car was having some fun before we rendered it. All right, so let's get a little closer here. Let me see here. I also, just like these other colors, I made another material here that's just a basic plastic, just so it looks like it fits a little bit better. I'm gonna drag it on top. Has some sheen here. And that's, we have something here that's looking like it's working. So I then went ahead and I took it to Output Tools and I rendered it out. And I got a couple of renders here that I can show you guys. So really that simply and that easily you can create, renders that show off your design. They can show off the surface of the model. You can see how we can do these sun studies and these surface studies, so you can see how the vehicle or the product that you have flows, and you can be as exaggerated or as artistic or as photoreal as you'd like. Great, guys. Well, thank you for watching. Make sure to also watch the other Visualize quick tips that I'm calling using a custom sunlight environment to create a sun study, to see how to create photorealistic sun study animations of your CAD models. See you guys soon, and I hope you guys found this very helpful. Thank you.